Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Heck yes. And you were telling me that this would be your first podcast?
It is. It'll be the first podcast I watch.
Okay.
And it's the first podcast that I've been on. So I haven't fully embraced the podcast world yet, but this will launch me into it. So I'm very excited to be here. And of course, I loved having you as a student. I love that we have stayed in touch all of these years. So
Heck yes. Yeah, I hesitate to say how many years it was. It was,
we don't.
yeah, it was 2 years ago, 2 years ago.
Right.
So we'll just jump right into some pre-existing questions that I have for you. I sort of jumped the shark a little bit with your introduction, but would you just say a little bit about what kind of law you practice?
Sure. So I practice marital and family law, which means that I help couples who want to get married and want to do a prenuptial agreement, couples who are done being married and they want to get divorced and we have to deal with property or child issues, or couples who never got married, but they had a child together. And so we need to navigate how to help them effectively co-parent and deal with support issues.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
It is.
I can imagine that you must get to dig really deeply into people's lives. Does it sort of scratch a reality show type itch of like
It
voyeurism?
does. You do. That's a great question. You do have to be very like sort of curious and nosy and really kind of if you're somebody who enjoys like walking into somebody's apartment and being like, how much do you pay for your rent? Like family law is really for you because you really have to delve into the most invasive details and minute details of somebody's life in terms of their parenting and their finances. So one would hope you would find it interesting. And I represent, spouses and parents as their attorney in litigation, but I also mediate for couples to try to help them reach a resolution. And then I also do guardian ad litem work. So I'm sometimes court appointed to represent not the child, but the child's best interest, which is a nuanced difference. So it's like a kid that can't come to you and say, I want this. You get to say, well, this is what I think is best for you because your parents can't agree. So I, a total stranger, shall tell the courts, another total stranger, what your parents should do with you.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that the Guardia Ad Litem program is fantastic. I'm not sure if it's local to Florida or not, but it's great, I think, because you see that cliche in pop culture back from the '80s, and I'm glad that this cliche is gone, where you'd have a lot of sensationalized media where a kid is put on a stand in a divorce proceeding and says, "Do you?" and they're forced to say, "Do you want to be with your mother or your father?" And that's heartbreaking and an impossible
Right, the
choice.
Drew Barrymore movie. What was it? Irreconcilable Differences, where she has to testify. Oh, that was such a good movie, though. But yeah, no, we don't do at most, and it's very rare. A judge may go to a child's school or bring a child in, but I have seen that. I could count on one hand the number of times I've seen that in the 20 plus years that I've been a lawyer. So we have guardians who do that job for the court. So we're not dragging kids into the courtroom.
That's fantastic. So yeah, lawyers, we are all soul-sucking vampires, but we do have some humanity to us, and we can evolve and change for the better, right?
Yes, yes.
So how do you like your practice of family law? Do you have any successes that in the field that you're especially proud of?
I do. I was thinking about that because there's so many cases where people come into your lives, you help them get divorced, you don't really think about them again. But then there's those cases that really like stay with you. And I've been lucky to have quite a few where you actually felt like you made a difference, right, for the better. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, in family law, the adversarial system is really not a great place to resolve these issues, but it's the system we have. And we've tried with mediation and collaborative law, which I'm also trained in, to kind of figure out alternative dispute resolution methods. But at the end of the day, your place of last resort is the courtroom. And so a lot of times, even couples who might have gotten along going into the process, if they don't have the right type of lawyers or procedure, they can often kind of be in a worse position in terms of their relationship at the end. And the goal is not that. But then there's those cases that just, you think of where you're like, I actually made a difference. The fact that I was their lawyer made a difference. And there was this one case where a dad came to me and he had been in a different sex relationship with a woman and they had two kids. And he was in the military. He was a doctor in the military, and they had a long distance parenting plan because he was stationed in California, she was in Florida, and he, figured out, oh my gosh, like I'm gay, so he was in a relationship with men, and when he would come to see the kids, he was never allowed in the house, which is not uncommon, but he became really concerned about the condition the kids were living in terms of what they were telling him, and when he came to me, the reason that he hadn't really done anything about it is because, we came up in this don't ask, don't tell society. He was in the military
Yeah.
and he genuinely thought that if he went to court, that he would lose all access to his kids because he was gay. And
I mean, 20 years ago,
it
that
was
might not have been
right.
wrong.
It was heartbreaking. And I go, that is not the law, nor is it the practice. And I filed actually an emergency ex parte petition to have him pick up the kids and remove them from the situation. It was that drastic.
Oh, wow.
And the court entered it. And then and he was able to pick up the kids, and we then had a hearing. And the court appointed a guardian ad litem for the kids. And another reason this case sticks out for me is because it's also the only time I have ever cried in court.
Oh,
I'm sitting there listening to the guardian describe the condition that these kids were living in, their home environment, the psychological abuse, the emotional abuse. The mother was very mentally ill, and
hmm.
I'm just tears streaming down my face. And the court basically relocated these kids, took them out of the mom's house. I'm on the phone with my client's like brand new boyfriend, who's like a grad student in his 20s, right? And this guy's all of a sudden, I'm like, we need bedroom furniture, we need a school,
Oh,
we need doctors, like we need to show the life that these kids are going to have in California. And he stepped up to the plate. And this was like over 10 years ago, but we've stayed in touch. These kids thriving, they're in college now. They had a wonderful life growing up with their dad and their stepdad, right? So that couple has endured and lasted. They send me a Christmas card every year. We stay in touch through social media. So I have watched these kids grow up and know that, I had a hand in giving these kids and this dad and this family a truly wonderful life, which was in such stark contrast to what they had been in. That's probably my favorite. I have quite a few, but that one really sticks with me.
oh, that's beautiful. And I can imagine that's the kind of thing that might have motivated you at the beginning of your career, even before you went into law school, to be able to make that difference.
Yeah,
Um,
because sometimes you do such stupid stuff. Like, I mean, once I had to like call people who are dog therapists, like some guy was like, she shouldn't have the dog. The dog is depressed. And I'm like, "But-" and the judge was like, yeah, like the dog might be depressed. And it's like, what? So sometimes you have to do such asinine things, or people just fight about the dumbest things. So when you actually get to make a difference,
yeah,
right? It sticks with you. And it is why you went into it, right? Why you go into family law, as opposed to, because you want to represent the people who are
yeah.
going through a really tough time and help them navigate that tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about your motivations, like going back when you were a senior in college, that's usually when most people start thinking about being the applications for being a lawyer. A lot of people think about it before. When you were getting ready to apply for law school, was your motivation to talk to dog therapists, or what did you?
That was top of my list. So I actually knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I was probably like 7 or 8,
Oh,
because my mom made sure that I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. She grew up in a time where it was really uncommon for women to be lawyers.
mhm.
She had wanted to be a lawyer, and she became a teacher instead. And so I was really there and happily to fulfill sort of her own sort of professional ambition. So I knew in high school I wanted to be a lawyer. I did debate. I knew in college I wanted to be a lawyer. And so when I was applying to law schools, I actually was working at the Center for Family and Divorce Mediation. So I was in college, and I was really interested in the government regulation of families, custody battles, and I was lucky enough to be able to major in that. And I did my thesis on fathers' rights. I did another term paper on sort of reproductive technologies. I did another huge paper on actually the violation of due equal protection and due process rights of LGBT parents. And then I had this amazing job, basically, and it was New York. So it was really interesting because of the housing and the school, and life is very different in New York City than in Florida. So when I was applying to law school, I knew I wanted to go into family law. And so I was able to really once you're able to choose classes, right? I was able to choose classes based on what I knew I was interested in. I never thought about most other law seems very boring to me. And it is, because I have a lot of lawyer friends, and it's like, oh no, like tell me more about, was it the contractor or the subcontractor's, liability for like the pool deck cracking? Oh, let's talk about that more at dinner, right? So to me, what my friends do, and they find it interesting, but
Yeah.
to me, it is yawn inducing. So yeah, I knew I wanted to go into family law, and I love math. I've always been very good at math, and there's a lot of math in family law because
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
dividing
like
property,
valuing.
you're calculating
Yeah.
support.
When you
My
were
coffee has kicked in case you can't tell.
huh? Oh yeah, nice. Well, hi.
We're in different time zones, but it's morning here.
Yeah, I'm winding down. You're starting up. That's great. Um, so you were in the law school, you were picking classes that were relating to family law. You found non-family law boring, or not as exciting, perhaps. Did your experience in law school influence you? Did you ever have your head turned from the mistress that is law school, or the mister, pardon me, from the
No,
mister that is family law? Was it, were there?
no, I really didn't. I mean, I thought my classes were interesting. I had great professors. I really enjoyed law school, but I very quickly, like, I joined the Family Law Society. And then when I was able to take electives, I took classes that I thought, family law, and did an internship at Legal Aid, and really sort of geared a lot of what I did towards family law. All of my jobs, other than research assistant. Well, no, I was actually a dean's fellow for civil procedure, but that's interesting. And we have procedural rules in family law. So I think that that helped. Being a research assistant helped. But no, there was never any, in fact, when I've had to deal with other areas of law tangentially in our cases, it just further cements for me that you're diplomatic. You're like, in terms of, but to me, it is very boring.
Yeah,
What else
yeah.
do? So.
Understandable. I had a similar sort of thing to you where I found a lot of areas of law boring when I was in law school. And I went in wanting to be a prosecutor, and I decided against that. So I found everything else really boring until I got to your family law class, which you have this larger than life personality. You make it really interesting and fun. And family law traditionally has a lot of females who gravitate toward it. And you had this whole crew of boys, including myself, who were all about the family law classes because you made it interesting for us. So
Thank you. Yeah, we did have quite a crew of boys who, most of whom I stay in touch with because a few of them actually practice family law. They're my colleagues. And one of them, I was a guardian ad litem in a case. And when you're a guardian, you can't act as your own attorney. And so I asked one of your classmates actually to be my attorney. And he was like flattered. It was so sweet. He's like, you could have asked me, buddy, and you asked me. And I was like, because I know you'll do a good job. I know that you'll do a great job. And he has. And one of my former students is now board certified in family law. And so it's been incredible. Even though my classes, I do tend to actually, I had one semester where I've had 2 semesters where I've only had one boy in the whole class. But yeah, we did go through that period where we had that core, our bros.
Yeah, there were like 15 to 20 of us or something. It was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, because in family law, we would usually have about 40. And then for my advanced seminars, I try to cap it at 20. And I think what happened is there was like a lot of texting, like, you take a Willis class, and we all kind of collectively agreed that we would all convene together for 2 more semesters for the advanced workshops. Yeah.
So that's absolutely one of my law school success stories, is being in that group of guys with you. And thinking back to your experience in law school with Civ Pro, that's a huge success, being a Dean's Fellow. Do you have any success stories like the Gal case where you look back and think, oh, wow, that was a really big success. I'm really happy I did that?
I mean, I definitely enjoyed law school. I think for me, I had gone away to New York City for college. I went to Columbia University. Big shout out. They are sharing the Ivy League football title. I was a cheerleader, so I actually care. It matters very much to me. I'm a 3rd generation Miami Hurricane. I'm wearing a Law shirt today. And so it was actually very hard to go to school with such a crappy football team. And they have redeemed themselves this weekend. But I had planned to stay in New York for law school. And then my mom sent me like a note, a handwritten note that said, please come back to Miami for law school. And the only time I had ever really defied her was when I became a cheerleader. She thought it was stupid. And I was like, marching band nerds don't get a say. You're making me transfer to the high school where she was teaching. So I didn't know anybody. And I was like, I need to make friends. And I like football. So, and I'm in the dance program. I was at a magnet school. So I was like, cheerleading makes sense. I was like, it's so stupid and whatever. I loved it. So that was my only defiance. But when your mom sends you a letter that lays out why you should come back home, you do it, right? And so I came back to Miami, and what really helped, it was so random. This guy who had taken me to his homecoming, we went to different schools, but we had met in debate.
Is CRY a fraternity? Is CRY a fraternity? Or you said guy, sorry.
A guy.
Oh, sorry.
He was 2 years ahead of me in law school. And it was like so wonderful to know somebody, even though, I'd been his homecoming date years earlier, but he like kind of, he like shared some outlines with me and kind of talked to me about professors. And so it really grounded me, coming back to Miami, not really knowing anybody, but I knew this one person, even though he wasn't even in my class. And we're Chad Lang, huge shout out to you. We're still friends to this day. So that really helped. And then, I'm a joiner. I've always been like, how many clubs can I join? I have a lot of school spirit. I cheered in both high school and college, but I also try to join a lot of clubs. So I just did that in law school, right? So I joined the Family Law Society, Miami Law Women. I was the vice chair of orientation. I did a law review. And I'm sure I did other stuff as well. And so that helps in law school because that's how you meet people. Yeah. You're not making friends sitting in a lecture hall with 100-something people at 8:30 in the morning, listening to your professor drone on and on, right? You make friends through, I did yearbook. I think I wrote some stuff for the newspaper. So you make your friends. So to me, I think my biggest success story is that my 2 best friends in law school
Hmm.
are still my friends to this day. And in fact, we all just had dinner 2 weeks ago. One, she had moved out of state. She'd been my roommate in law school, and she was in town. And we all had dinner, and it was just, that's the success, right?
Yeah.
To maintain those. And in fact, two of the lawyers who I work with were two of my closest friends in law school. Um, so that to me is a greater success than, I mean, I did very well in law school.
Yeah,
I'm deceptively nerdy, right? Like when it hits midnight, I'm like, turtle, strands, connection. Like I found my little games. Like I'm definitely a nerd. And so I did very well in law school. I've always been very good at school. I was magna cum laude, order of the coif, law review, I'm a moot court, all the bells and whistles. But to me, the biggest success is that I still have friends to this day that were friends I made in law school, and that our former classmates come to me to do their divorce. So I just had a woman who, like, we went to law school together, and she just came to me last week to have me help navigate her very amicable divorce. And so that is also a huge success when people trust you, because divorce is such a, it can be so awful. It's so emotional. You're in limbo. It's such a change in trajectory of your relationship with someone. And so to trust me is such a huge honor.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I think that, yeah, there's so many things you touched on there, but one of those things that you touched on totally overlaps like 1,000% with why I started this podcast, which is, there's a lot of pressure going into law school to achieve conventional successes. And I think you're such a good example to law students coming in that as somebody who has achieved a great deal of traditional successes in law school, law review, all the clubs, all the orientation, all the grades, everything like that. You're coming out of it looking back thinking my biggest successes were interpersonal and relating to making friends there. And like there's also that classic trope of look to your left, look to your right, this is one of you won't be here next year or
Which is
whatever.
very true.
Right,
It's
yeah,
very
true.
true.
Yeah, but if you can sort of avoid that competitive thinking and think more more about interpersonal successes, there'll be something you can take with you. And I really find that incredibly inspirational as somebody who didn't have so many traditional successes in law school. Although, like I said, your class was a huge success for me.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
think about this one student I had. He asked me to do a recommendation for him.
mhm.
And I was in the student lounge filling it out. So I just started kind of asking all the students, like, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy? And everybody was like, he's so nice. He's so nice. So I do this recommendation, totally forget to send it in, right? He then called me. And it's sitting in the front seat of my car. I'm in my car. I'm near campus. I'm like, oh my God. So I run it over personally too, because he wanted to do an MBA in addition to his law degree. And I hand deliver it. And he tells me, he goes, they gave me, not only did I get in, they gave me a scholarship. And I was like, what? He goes, first of all, they couldn't believe that a professor took the time to hand deliver it, as opposed to it just being me being forgetful. But also it was because it wasn't like he was such a good student. He was this, it was like, what I wrote about is that how hard it is to have the respect of all of your peers in law school when there's a lot of assholes in law school. Sorry. There's so much cutthroat competition. People are jockeying for positions in different law reviews and moot court boards and getting honors. And
Yeah.
so to have someone so universally liked, and so that was, to me, that's what I want my students to be. I want them to be nice to each other and collaborative and cooperative and learn that lesson. Because when you become a lawyer, and it's why I have my students do so much group work with each other, is
Yeah.
because that mimics being a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of more collaboration, I think, than people think. You're not just alone in front of your computer typing out emotion. You're messaging your friends or calling them, say, hey, have you had this issue before? I had a former student call me. She had some issue. And she's like, have you ever dealt with this issue? And I said, yeah, I actually had to do a memo of law on it for the court. I'll send it to you. And I sent it to her, and she sends me like a little Starbucks gift card, very sweet. She goes, you saved my client like 2-3 hours of lawyer time. And I was able to just convert what you had done. And that's the goal, right? To be able to share your work product and collaborate. And so with the law school kids, it's like, be nice
Yeah.
to the other kids, get involved in your activities. And it can matter, listen, if you want to be a Supreme Court justice,
Yeah.
probably you should do really well. But otherwise, if you develop good work habits, I don't know how much it matters. All the big law firm people are going to be like, no, like they have algorithm and metrics and what classes did you take and what grade did you get? But most people don't go into that, right? So if you're otherwise, it's just figure out how to become a good, well-rounded person who knows how to effectively deal with time management and how to get along with other people.
Yeah, I mean, if let's say hypothetically 10%, you choose whatever number is more accurate. If that's not an accurate representation, let's say 10% get into big law out of H3L class every year. All right, so are you gonna enter into any situation as a institution aiming to only help that 10% or to help the 90%.
Right.
Like, yeah, so those, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Kara. Shifting gears a little bit, law school is in many ways all about writing. It's an incredibly foundational skill set. When you were in law school, did your writing shift? I mean, you knew pretty early on that you wanted to become a lawyer. So had you come into law school with any writing prep? How did your writing evolve when
Yeah.
you
So because I went to Barnard College at Columbia University, there were so many huge, not just my thesis, my graduate, my whatever, my senior thesis, but I had so many like huge papers and research projects to do. But what you learn in law school, because also family law, it is both litigation and transactional, right? You're drafting prenups, postnups, marital settlement agreements, parenting plans, addendums to marital settlement agreements. You know, you're drafting a lot of contracts, and then you're also drafting a lot of pleadings and motions and discovery requests. But what you learn is you know, anybody can write a 50-page motion. What you learn in law school is how to write a 2-page motion and say everything you need to say. Because we are underfunded, the judges are overburdened with cases. There's a huge, significant population of family law litigants who don't have lawyers, right? In a way that's not present maybe like in civil court. And so the judges are dealing with, you know, pro se litigants and a gazillion cases and overburdened calendars. And so you don't want to give them a long rambling motion that you might in college have been great because you need to, you know,
yeah, fully
but
patient.
it is, somebody famous said it, I don't even know who, but it's sort of like, this would have been, it would have been shorter if I'd had more time, right?
That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, learning how to write shorter, I think is more succinctly is such great advice.
And advocacy,
Okay.
right? To figure out how to spin something. I remember I was in a trial workshop, and this is a very like silly example, but in the fact pattern, it was that the dad gave the kid some sugary cereal in the morning. And these are things people do actually care about because you want to set your child up for success.
Yeah.
So there is sort of a like, you know, what are you feeding them in the morning? And the advocacy there is that the lawyers for mom can kind of pound dad for just sort of giving this kid like a really unhealthy sugary breakfast. They're going to get to school, sugar crash, be distracted and irritable. Whereas the lawyers for dad are like, look how attuned this dad is to his kid's needs and what his kid likes. And he knows what his child's favorite cereal is. And he makes sure that this child feels loved and wanted because he's having his favorite treat before school, right? So that's advocacy, the same fact. And then how do you spin it and present it to a court? That's, you know, something you learn in law school for sure.
Wow. And your ability to do that with your ability to present that so quickly and succinctly, like my heart just dropped a little bit because I just imagined myself trying to argue both sides of an issue. And I would be kind of rambling on a little bit more than you because you're so experienced in this. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're in law school, if you can do that as quickly as Kira, like that's fucking hashtag goals.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
you're trained in moot court to do that, right? Because when you do your moot court competition, which my partner Don West and I won, we were very, very excited.
Congrats.
But
Another law school success
you don't
story.
know until you get there which side you're arguing, right?
Okay.
So you have to be ready to completely argue either side. And that's a great skill, I think, that is taught in law school. And it also to always see the other side, right? Your client's not always in the right.
That's true.
So, yeah.
We have 10 minutes of recording time left, just to give you a update on the time. So just to sort of skip to some of the meat and potatoes, not skip to the meat and potatoes, sort of to skip to one of the questions that I'm really excited to ask you. What do you consider a success story in law school? And what criteria would you use to evaluate? And I know we went over this a little bit earlier with the interpersonal skills being so important. But like how would you define a success in law school? Traditional or
Well,
non-traditional or
I think it's so individual. You know, I think just getting in and is such a huge thing, right? To get into law school and to go. But I think it's being very mindful while you're there. It can be so anxiety inducing. I've had so many students who have struggled with mental health, who have struggled with substance abuse, who had maybe a really traumatic event happen, you know, losing a parent or getting into a horrible accident, you know, that they weren't able to complete their semester or complete their classes. And so I think honestly, you know, just getting through it in like a mindful way and appreciating you know, where you are, the privilege of getting to spend an extra 3 years in school, learning critical thinking skills and respecting, you know, where you are and taking advantage of the opportunities. Like UM has, you know, amazing externships and internships. They have amazing clinical programs. They have a litigation skills program. It's such a beautiful campus.
Oh yeah. Yes,
And it
sir.
has just such a great faculty and administration. So it's like just taking advantage of all the things that are offered and coming out of law school with your friends and with your integrity. I remember there was this guy who and this girl would always sign this guy into class when he wasn't there. And like I've just never had respect for them as lawyers. I would never send them a case. I would never refer them anything because it's like, really? Like you're gonna lie about that? Just show up to class. Just show
Yeah.
what are you like what are you paying for? So to me, if you get through it with a good reputation and your integrity, that and I know that's like kind of cheesy and kumbaya, but it is how I feel, especially because I've been teaching since 2007. I was quite young and inexperienced when I was asked to teach. But that to me, I think was a huge success. I was at work with a girl that I had been on law review with, and we were great friends. And we worked together, and she was like, "Hey, Professor Fazier is having a bar mitzvah for his dog. Do you want to go?" Who would say no to that, right? Like,
I
what?
can
His dog's
imagine.
turning 13? Of course we gotta go, right? So that all the deans were there, and they were deans who had been my professors who had ascended to become deans. And that's when I was offered the opportunity to become an adjunct professor at UM, was at this bar mitzvah. And I'm sure some like Aristotle or Descartes or somebody said it, but I remember Oprah saying, she was like, good luck is when opportunity meets hard work. Like I've been working really hard as a lawyer, and I'm opportunity. I'm at this party with all these deans, and then that's the good luck, right? Because of becoming a teacher. But I think I bring that perspective, not just having been a law student for 3 years, which was very, it's still stressful. Like don't get me wrong. But watching my students navigate through it for all of the years that I've been teaching gives you a different perspective. Whereas I was very into racking up awards and accolades, and then you kind of realize, what's really important when I watch my students, who's respected, who's not, who takes shortcuts, who's lazy, who doesn't follow instruction, and who, is very thoughtful, very kind to their classmates, kind to the professors.
Fantastic. Huh. I wish I had listened to you say this before I went to law school. I think I would have been a lot more successful. But I did have you as my professor, so I did get a lot of this good advice in person uh, while I was there. And so this is the last one. It's a bit of a two-parter. It's Are there any attorney within the field of law or otherwise? Is there anything or anyone you find particularly inspiring of late, be it legal or personal? And also, what is your favorite thing about being a lawyer? Although I think the listener can probably guess the favorite thing about being a lawyer after listening to this so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think watching Ketanji Brown Jackson go from, I had done debate in the Miami-Dade County public school system the way she did, and she was at Palmetto, I was at Southridge, and watching her ascend to become a Supreme Court justice, watching her confirmation hearings. I was in DC this summer, and my cousin, who's a lawyer, was like, by the way, we live two blocks from her. Our kids go to school together. And I was like, we have to drive past her house. And of course I panicked because there's, the black SUVs and the agents. Like I could never be a spy, right? Like but it was like, I was like, oh, let's drive past her house. She, I think, is such a huge inspiration to women lawyers, to black women lawyers, to people from Miami. I mean, it's just so huge to watch her with all, because people, I think younger generations don't realize how many barriers there have been to women in the profession, particularly to black women in the profession. So to watch her have to be, 10 times as good as some of those mediocre men on the court to get where she is, to me, she's such a huge inspiration. It's funny because she came to speak this summer, and I got my mom and her friends tickets, but my mom's like, you're not going? And I'm like, I never miss a Miami Hurricanes home football game, ever, ever. I have had to skip weddings. There's only 6 or 7 home games a year. It's always my top priority. So I didn't actually get to see her when she came, but I was like, I drove past her house. And then in terms of my favorite thing of being a lawyer, listen, I work with a lawyer named Elizabeth Schwartz, and she always says, you can do good and you can do well, right? So you can be financially successful. We grew up without very much money. My mom was a public school teacher. My parents were divorced. My dad was a firefighter. And that economic insecurity I grew up with, I hated. And so being a lawyer, I don't, I stress about, my building just had like a 6-figure special assessment. But I don't stress about money the way that I did growing up. And so that's one wonderful thing about being a lawyer is most likely you will make more really kind of doing any type of law other than if you're too much of a do-gooder, right? But you can also, you do good, right? You do good for, like, I make fun of some of my friends where I'm like, don't you just help rich people avoid paying taxes. My friends are like, yeah. They're like, and it's soul sucking, and they really hate it. It's it's like the golden handcuffs, right? Whereas I can make a very good living, but also you're representing people. And so that's really the favorite part is I was at the Equality Task Force gala, big little gay event. And I represent a lot of LGBT couples. I'm a huge ally to the LGBT community. And what was so rewarding is having all these guys running up being like, oh my God, like you're my lawyer, Kira, da, 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 da.
Oh,
Especially because these last 4 years have been so Zoom heavy. I haven't met some of them in person, right? I've just been this pink-haired face on Zoom. And then there I am, in my, black tie attire at this party. And it was so rewarding to have people come up because nobody regrets getting divorced. It is a tough process, and people might regret the manner in which they fought, or how much they spent fighting over getting too involved in the fight, but nobody regrets getting divorced. And so that is very rewarding as a lawyer to help people navigate that process.
oh, Kara, all those sentiments are so beautiful. I wish that more attorneys were like you. I think we'd have a better reputation in the zeitgeist if more were like you.
Thank
And
you.
absolutely. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think your attitude toward law and teaching is incredibly inspirational. If you're listening to this as a law student, do good. Don't think about doing well. Doing well will happen.
Yes, it will. Yeah, yeah. Do good, and the doing well will come for sure. I love that.
I think we've got ourselves a tagline for the show.
Perfect.
Well, thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much, Wes, and
Kira.
it's so good to see you.
You as well. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, bye.